Owning a boat comes with a number of perks, like being able to say ahoy or land ho and not feel weird about it. So here's another perk. Geico's boat insurance offers access to the largest towing fleet on the water. And with specialist support from agents that are as passionate about boating as you are, there's so much value that you'll want to say, shiver me timbers, and not feel weird about that either. Get more with Geico.
This is Wheelbearings. I'm Dan Roth.
And I'm Sam Abu-Al-Samad.
So welcome to episode 26. This week we've got a lot to cover, and I kind of want to do it in a little tighter fashion for everybody's listening pleasure. So buckle up, I guess. But the first thing we'll do is talk about what we're driving, which dovetails actually quite nicely. So we're going to try to sort of contain what we're driving and then go on a tangent that's completely relevant and everybody will like it. So that's because of you, Sam.
Okay.
So, I guess you drove a couple of things this week, but sort of like the car that's darkening your driveway is an old favorite of mine. That's the Grand Cherokee,
it's
right?
Actually it's no longer darkening the driveway. It went back yesterday. But yeah, it's the 2017 Jeep Grand Cherokee Summit, which is like their premium edition version of it. And yeah, it's the Grand Cherokee is definitely an old favorite of mine as well. The current edition is actually really nice. It's been around about 4 years?
They changed it in 2014, and then they just keep like incrementally changing it every year.
So but I mean, even going back to the original Grand Cherokee in the early 90s, that was introduced after Bob Lutz drove it through the plate glass window at the Cobo Center at the Detroit Auto Show. One thing about the Grand Cherokee, among SUVs is it's always had some of the best driving dynamics of any SUV that actually has also real off-road capability. And that continues to the current generation. It's got shockingly good ride quality for something that's as capable as it is.
Well, and that was one of the reasons that actually drove us to purchase the Grand Cherokee was that, we tried a few other things and they just, they rode crappy or they didn't handle very well. They weren't very composed. The Grand Cherokee, you can really feel that it shares a platform with the Mercedes.
Yeah. Well, I don't think it still does.
I believe it still does. The tell for me is the rear lower control arms.
Okay.
They look exactly the same on the Grand Cherokee as they do on the, it's been renamed now, but I think it's the GLE. Whatever it had been the ML, whatever the ML is.
Now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the lower control arms in the rear are the same. And if you look at the dashboard, the outlets for the HVAC are roughly in the same spot.
Okay.
Because that's sort of like core engineering that they're not going to change if they don't have to. It's very expensive. So,
So
but it's good.
the Grand Cherokee's always been, probably one of the best looking midsize SUVs. It's not, it's an actual proper SUV, it's got its own dedicated platform. It's a unibody, but it's not, based on a front wheel drive platform or anything like that. It's true. Grand Cherokees only come with 4-wheel drive. They've got some different flavors of 4-wheel drive, but they're all 4-wheel drive. There's no 2-wheel drive, rear or front drive versions.
I thought that. Well, I don't know. I don't want to split hairs. I thought you could buy a rear-wheel drive Grand Cherokee.
I don't think so.
Okay, I could be wrong.
I think it's like the Wrangler. They've never offered a rear drive version of it.
No, the rear drive Wrangler only happens when you break the front drive shaft.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a unibody, but there's beefy subframes under there. Having sort of crawled around under my own. It's well thought out for going off road, which I agree. It makes it all the more shocking that it is so well behaved on the road.
Yeah, well, especially when you compare it to the Wrangler. You've heard me complain in the past about some vehicles that along certain stretches of highway around these parts, that get into very bouncy vertical motions. And the Wrangler is one of those vehicles that does that, but the Grand Cherokee does not. It's totally, stable and composed, on everything I've driven it over. And it's also very comfortable. It's roomy. The current generation is really nicely executed in terms of the interior materials and the fit and finish. It doesn't have an electronic shifter the way most other current Fiat Chrysler products do. So it's a mechanical shifter, to the transmission.
Oh, you've still got the wait, I thought it had the rotary knob now.
No, not in the Jeeps.
Huh.
Chrysler models do.
Okay.
But the Jeeps.
Oh, right. I'm thinking of the Ram. I had a Ram that had the rotary knob. Yeah.
Rams have them. But
right.
The Jeeps have, or at least the Grand Cherokee and the Wrangler. I haven't. I'm not sure what's in the new Compass. I'll have to take a closer look at that one. But the Grand Cherokee still has a mechanical shifter, so it's more. You know which gear you're in when you shift.
Yeah. And we could talk about that when we get to what I'm driving.
Yeah.
The powertrain in this one, it's a Summit. Is it the Pentastar or is it the V8?
The Pentastar, and it's the latest iteration of the Pentastar with the 8-speed automatic, and it has auto stop start, which is it's also very well executed. It's very smooth. As soon as you lift your foot off the brake, that engine's fired back up again, and you're ready to go. There's no waiting for it. Got surprisingly good fuel economy. Even though it's riding on 20-inch wheels, got averaged like 22 miles per gallon over the week I drove it.
That's so much better than what mine gets.
Yeah,
mine gets 18.
Yeah, no, it's nice. It's not cheap. This one was about $60,000.
Yeah.
But if you compare it to a lot of other $60,000 luxury SUVs, that compares very favorably to most of them. Compared to a GLE or an X5 or let's see, probably I guess Audi Q7 would probably be the closest in size to this one. It compares very favorably.
Well, and that's what I felt about it, was because it had that, it's kind of expensive underlying engineering, right? They did it like the way a large sort of multi-line European automaker does it back when they designed this one, the WK.
Uh-huh.
And then they made it the WK2 for I think 2011 when they went to fully independent suspension. The original WK had a solid rear axle still.
Right.
But overall, this dates back largely to the WKs. And that was under Daimler ownership. So there's this one platform had to serve two masters, and actually more, because it was
also the basis of the Dodge Durango.
Right. Which started off as the Commander. It's to the point where the last Durango I had, I looked, and one of the stickers inside on the seats still had like the outline of a Commander.
Oh, did it really?
Yeah. I was like, well, we didn't pay to upgrade that one. But yeah, so they put a lot of hard work into making just a real good basic platform, and then you can climb sort of the ladder of niceness, and that's you've got the Summit, which is pretty much the top trim, and there's some options that you can make it even nicer if you want. But the Summit is basically like that. That's the ne plus ultra of Grand Cherokees, and it is very nice.
A mesh grill, mesh inserts in the 7 bars of the grill, that sort of thing.
Right.
So,
but the basic goodness is there in the Laredo, if you really want it. Like, a Laredo with an X package, well, that's pretty much a limited. They do this interesting thing where they kind of overlap at the trim levels. And so the Laredo is the base model. The Laredo X is basically the same equipment level that a Limited has. Standard Limited's roughly $40,000. And that has like leather and a sunroof and, some nice stuff.
I drove a Laredo a couple of years ago, and, not quite as, nicely trimmed out inside, but, in terms of the way it drives and everything else, it was just as good.
Right. It's dead on. It's just you're missing like, my leather seats in the Limited are not as nice as the leather seats in the Overland or the Summit. I don't have leather on the dashboard like the Summit. So there's you do climb the price ladder and you climb the niceties. But it's just a solid vehicle. I'm a little bit worried about what they're going to follow it up with, because it's starting to get long in tooth, and the Grand Cherokee is sort of like the highest value property in, I don't know, all of the Chrysler portfolio. That is like, that's probably the best thing they make.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Um,
I'm actually just looking at the building price for the Grand Cherokee on the website, the Jeep website, and it is in fact available as a 4x2. So I was mistaken.
Yeah. Well, who the hell wants to buy that?
No, why bother?
I guess, for states where it doesn't snow or what, I mean, and it's granted you don't need 4-wheel drive for snow, but it is pretty nice to have. And they offer multiple 4-wheel drive systems.
If you're going to drive one in states with no snow, then you might want to just step up to an SRT or the Trackhawk,
right?
Which is the Hellcat powered version of the Grand Cherokee, which just
seems bonkers.
Yeah, but hey, why not? The Cayenne GTS, why not a Trackhawk?
And that's Chrysler's niche, is like they do some solid vehicles, and then they just do this sort of off the wall stuff. And that's fine. I'm glad that they do that.
Yeah.
But I am. Well,
that one is going to get seriously expensive. I've heard from somebody inside there that one might be close to $90,000.
That's still a deal, though, when you consider what it's going to do.
Oh yeah.
I don't think that's outrageous.
700 horsepower Grand Cherokee.
Yeah, that's fine, but it's worth every penny.
Why
not? So yeah, that's. I mean, that has to be a pretty good week rolling around in the Grand Cherokee. Although it's gone now, so I'm sorry to. We're. I hope they replaced it with something at least as nice. It's hard to come down off that sometimes.
Yeah, you could say that. I swapped it for a Jaguar XF diesel R-Type. So we'll talk about that one next week.
Yeah, we'll talk about that next week. So, and we'll talk shortly about what else you drove this week. But just to keep it on the garage side. So I drove sort of like ho-hum, and they replaced that with actually a pretty nice car. So I drove the Ford Escape Titanium, which I don't know if I have a whole lot to say about that. It's a solid platform. It's quiet. It does everything it's supposed to do. It incites no passion. It's not supposed to.
I was a 2-liter or the 1.5?
Yeah. No, it was a 2-liter. The powertrain is very good. It's pretty refined and definitely powerful, and just zips right along, and it feels very solid on the road. It drives fine. But it was a lot of dough. It's a titanium trim, but it didn't have leather seats.
Really?
It had like some sort of like split upholstery option. Yeah.
Titaniums came standard with leather.
I was like $37,000 too.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money for an Escape. And Sync 3 better, still not great. But it was okay. And this is an issue. Like, it's a compact crossover, but I know everything has gotten kind of like more expensive now too, but from like my frame of reference of what used to be expensive, this is apparently what happens when you age. But 37 seems like an awfully high price to be paying for something that's just, you're buying a crossover for utility, and it just doesn't seem all that utilitarian. It's kind of a tight package.
None of the compact crossovers really are all that utilitarian. When you think about it, they're fine. But compared to, say, a Ford Focus wagon, which you can buy in Europe, but you can't buy here.
I would so love to have the Focus wagon.
Yeah, I would take the Focus wagon too over the utility, but that's not what American consumers want. So what are you going to do? You got to give people what they actually want to buy. If you want,
we could move to Europe. Damn it! I'm gonna move there just for the wagons.
Even the European market has been shifting towards crossovers in recent years. So it's not a uniquely American thing. Actually, it's actually more of a global.
Yeah, it's a global craze, and I don't get it.
Yeah, and even in China, they're getting more and more into crossovers.
Well, and that's I say I don't get it, but then again, I do get it. Because they're car-like. The seating position is up, which is nice, and apparently the sort of prevailing fashion is away from wagons, and that's okay. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I guess I get it, but
the compact crossover really is, the 21st century station wagon.
Yeah, that's true. Unfortunately, you kind of miss out on a bunch of the wagon goodness, just at the altar of style.
Yeah,
and this is another one like the Grand Cherokee that the Escape now it's not that old, but it's starting to age. And really, where that comes through is in how you the secondary controls, and the Escape. This generation always had that weird Euro Ford kind of feeling to it because it's focus based, and so it has a lot of buttons and they're kind of confusing. You got to poke around a little bit, and yeah, Sync 3 is a lot better than earlier iterations of My Ford Touch, but it's still, it's gonna be I think it's gonna take like a full redesign before it gets better. It's not bad. It's just it's not as good as it could be.
You mean if Sync 3 it needs a redesign?
No, I think just overall, it's not necessarily the vehicle itself. Like just the Sync 3 is sort of the least of its problems. Sync 3 is good. It's pretty snappy and it's a little bit easier to figure out than some of the other systems, and it is what it is.
Yeah, I mean it's stable. It doesn't crash like my Ford Touch used to.
Right.
And the control the UI is definitely much better. It's easier to find stuff and get at things. You're not trying to hit tiny touch targets in the corners of the screen, that sort of thing.
Yeah. And so this is one of those, I guess it's one of those cases where like with just a week with it, it's a little confusing. Once you live with it, it's probably better, but there are a lot of like small same size buttons jammed together on the dash, and that makes it a little tough to like do.
And that's that hardware side of it, that you're right, that's something that's only going to come with the next generation vehicle. And I think when they do that, that is going to change. It'll probably look more like what we've been shown of the 2018 EcoSport that's coming to the US market early next year. That one, the direction that Ford's going, like most other manufacturers, is having more of a upright tablet style touchscreen at the top of the center stack, that kind of sticks up from the rest of the dash, and then a better laid out array of buttons and switches below it.
Yeah, and I'm not sure how I feel about that. With I guess I'm gonna have to see how that gets executed, because like I thought Volvo's sort of tablet size screen would be good, but it's not. And I think part of that is the actual UI.
Yeah, I mean that's I think that the UI is more of the problem there. Having the larger screen, that's mounted up a little bit higher, which is a direction that a lot of manufacturers are going. Mazda's been doing that for a few years now, and a lot of the Europeans have been doing that. It gets the display up closer to your line of sight, so you don't have to look down and away as much to see what's on the screen.
Yeah.
So you're not looking as much away from the road. So I think that's generally a better layout.
Yeah, and I mean, to pick on sort of the dashboard of the car sort of shortchanges the rest of the car, because it is like the Escape is. I really loved the first generation Escape. This second generation Escape is much better. Overall in every aspect, it's much lighter on its feet, and I mean it's weighty. It goes down the road with a purpose, but it's nimble, I guess. It's not necessarily light on its feet in that sense. Handles really well. It's let down by its tires.
Yeah, it's got good dynamics.
But yeah, it rides and handles like it was sort of designed by somebody who knew what they were doing. It's not a vehicle that really kind of encourages you to take advantage of it, but it definitely it hangs on. Not too much body roll and stuff. It's a decent size. It's right in that sort of C segment crossover size. The interior just feels tight, even though it's larger than the original Escape. And I remember running the numbers a couple of years ago, and I was surprised to find out that it's got more cargo space, it's got more rear leg room. It's just the original one was so boxy that it just felt bigger, and the dashboard kind of comes in the console.
When you compare the Escape to some of the latest of its competitors, like the latest CRV and the Chevy Equinox, it is a little bit shorter than.
Yeah, they're bigger. They're definitely bigger.
So it is a little bit tighter inside, or the Nissan Rogue is another one. they're all a little bit longer, slightly longer wheelbase. So they do feel a little bit roomier.
Yeah, and the Rogue, I think, is
especially the back seat.
The Rogue, I think, is its most direct competitor, and that's a quiet giant in this segment. It sells a lot, and it's very very competitive.
Yeah, I mean it's actually Nissan's best selling vehicle,
and
they sold over 300,000 of them last year.
For a reason. But anyway, we should talk about something that's a little less boring. So a couple days ago they dropped off a BMW 530i. And I really have mixed feelings about it. It's I think it's like the automotive embodiment of everything we cover on the podcast. On the one hand, it's equipped the way BMW intenders and loyal owners probably want it because BMW knows their market. But on the other hand, I think we should acknowledge now that BMW has retreated from being a sports sedan maker to a luxury car maker. Their cars have definitely always been luxury items, but a core part of the brand's cachet was the performance edge. And I've been driving this 530 for a couple of days, and I put like extra miles on it, sort of by mistake because I missed an exit in the rain and I had to go another 15 miles to turn around. That's a completely different story. But it's capable, but it's not like. Past 5 Series cars, the E39 and even the E60, those were benchmarks. This is just another one in the segment in that sense. It's a full-on luxury car. It's quiet, it's really comfortable, it's full of tech. And I think that's now sort of what people buying this type of car want. And so that was an interesting sort of mental exercise to get to understand that like this 5 Series is what the 5 Series needs to be right now.
Well, I mean, if you look at the way, and this is the same can be said of pretty much every model and every vehicle, every brand's lineup. But if you look at the way the 5 Series has evolved over the last 20 years, like everything else in the BMW lineup and like everything from every manufacturer, it has gotten bigger. And the 5 Series today, is bigger than a 7 Series was, 20 years ago. So it's kind of, you could almost say it has taken the place of what a 7 Series used to be. And in fact, the previous generation and this generation of the 5 Series actually shares its platform with the 7 Series. So, it's going to tend to feel more like the bigger car, which has always been, more of a luxury model as opposed to a sports sedan. It was like 2 generations ago, when the 5 Series had its own platform. Right. So, it's going to have a different feel. And, the 3 and 4 Series that we have today are, closer to what a 5 Series was, 20, 25 years ago.
That's fair. And like, honestly, it's a very good luxury car. Don't get me wrong. I think the thing that stood out the most for me is like, this car is full of technology. And some of it's really, really good. The automated cruise control, I think it's excellent. It's very fine-tuned. It's smooth at acceleration and deceleration. Just really, really refined. Probably the best I've used all year, among the top in any class. It's really good. And that's hard to do. Like I think it's one of those features now that's cheap enough and easy enough to put in the car, but it's hard to make it, really as refined as it is here.
It's the control software is the key to it now because the radar sensors are under $50.
Yeah.
So it's a relatively inexpensive bit of extra hardware to add now, and it all comes down to how you calibrate the system and get all the other pieces working together, getting the powertrain and the brakes working as part of that speed control mechanism.
Yeah, they've really, really done their homework, just the sort of the ramps to log up, to ramp up the brake pressure and stuff. It's all really smooth, really well done. And these, like, that's the keys. Like, these systems can be jerky in traffic where you want them the most, or they just give up. Some of them don't have that was one of the things that bugged me about the Escape, where it had radar cruise, but in a stop and go situation under 20 miles an hour, it's like, nope, you take the wheel. It's like, come on, guys.
Yeah, well, the thing is, in order to do full speed stop and go capability, you actually need to have 2 radar sensors. that are operating at different frequencies. You need a longer range radar for higher speeds and a short range radar for lower speeds. So a lot of the systems on lower cost vehicles still only have a single radar sensor. So they have the long range radar sensors, which is what they originally used when they first introduced this stuff, and that'll get you down to down to the 20-mile-an-hour range. Below that, you need a short range sensor, which operates at like I say, a different frequency, and that takes over there and gives you that full speed capability, the full stop.
And they can't use the cheaper sonar sensors that are in the bumpers for not crashing into stuff when you're parking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, they're not. There's not enough precision there. And in fact, those are the ultrasonic sensors are too short range. They're not long enough range to do that. So you actually need something in between what the ultrasonic sensors will do, and the long range radar. So what we're most manufacturers have been moving towards either a dual sensor setup, which Ford has now. On when they did the refresh last year on the Fusion, they added that in there, so it's got full stop and go capability now. Because when it launched in 2013, it only had the long range radar. So they've got full stop and go now on the Fusion. And I think when they redo the Focus the Escape in the next year or so, then I'm sure we'll see the same capability added in there as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's totally worth it. I in something like a BMW, and so the Escape's going to lend itself to the MKC, so it'll be worth it there too. I'm a control freak, and so this is where me and BMW go in two different directions. Everything in this car has its own mind. The wipers, the HVAC, the mirrors, the driver aids, just like everything does its own thing, and it's so distracting and annoying. Like, I don't want you to blow cold air at me. I set it to like warm. Stop trying to be like a house thermostat. And like you adjust the seat, and there's little animations that play on the LCD. Like, that's really necessary. Like, it just, I realize this is me. Not the car, but it's taken me 2 days to sort most of it out and shut as much of it off as I can. But yeah.
But you see, the thing is, if you actually own the car, once you get the stuff set up and then you save it into the memory position, and you can tie that to individual key fobs.
Yeah, that's fine.
You and your spouse can have different settings, and whichever key fob you walk up to, it can preset itself to that. So once you figure out where you want it, then it's
yeah, that's true, and it does some cool stuff. Like, you can precondition the interior, which I thought was cool. Like, that's something that a lot of like plugins and EVs can do, but this car can do it as well. So I thought that was slick, and yeah, it's a good teched up car, I suppose, in that sense, if that's your thing. It's like I said.
I'm curious. Did you try does yours have the gesture control?
It did some things that I did not expect it to be doing, so I turned off the gestures. It does have it. I should play with it. Because all of that stuff is actually pretty well integrated. BMW has really done its homework with putting the right kind of tech that the driver's going to want. The iDrive system's really easy to use and refined. Now, there is a lot of adjustment. I do, even with I talk about the HVAC, being kind of a mind of its own, but also like there's two fans. The passenger can have their own fan and the driver has their own fan, and you can adjust the airflow split, and you can have warmer feet and cooler hands if you want. Like those are like, that's worth the $75,000 the car costs. You better get that stuff. And so it's a particular kind of car for a particular kind of owner. And once you get it all dialed in, like you say, I think that's a key. Once you own it, that makes it really feel like yours. One thing I cannot get used to is it doesn't shut off. If you open the door, which I've found out, apparently this is what I do. I'll get to where I'm going, I'll put it in park, I'll open the door, and then I'll shut it off. It stays on, like all the interior, the audio system and everything just keeps playing. And you you'll press the button to shut it off and it won't shut off. So you have to shut it off with the door closed, and then it'll shut everything down. And then if you walk around to the passenger door and open it, it'll turn the thing back on again. And unless you lock it, and then it shuts everything off.
I don't remember experiencing that when we drove it.
It keeps it on for like a little while. It retains accessory power, and then it'll shut it off on its own. But that's like, I'm not going to walk away from the car with the audio system playing. Like, no. I'm just sorry. That's just, again, that's me. So I've ranted enough. Let's move on to the final car, which was the NSX, and it didn't necessarily spend any time in your garage, but you got to have a good time with it.
Yeah, I got to spend about an hour and a half, 2 hours with the Acura NSX. Unfortunately, they haven't had any in the regular Michigan press fleet up to this point. Most of them have been out in California. They brought a couple around for brief periods for the buff books to use, and to like for Car and Driver to use for their 10 best testing and that sort of thing. But for the most part, they've kept them out on the West Coast. But they did bring a couple into town earlier this week, and brought them to Milan Dragway, where we got a chance to experience the launch control system that they had on there. So before hitting the drag strip, I got to take one out for about a 20-minute drive around some roads in the neighborhood. And man, that is such a good car. I don't know if you ever had a chance to drive a first generation NSX.
I didn't, but this is what we were talking about the other day was, looking at it from a completely unexperienced sort of just like bench racing perspective. I was having trouble putting together how this NSX is a continuation of that first gen, because the first gen really put the whole like auto world, especially these high end sports cars, on notice. Like it's a perfect car. It's not like the Ferraris of that time where they're kind of like they're built with hammers and tongs, and you can see the imperfections. Like the NSX is it's an Accord high end sports car, and you were saying, it was because of that, like, yes, it pushed all of those exotic manufacturers to get as good, but it was also kind of a sanitized experience, which was my concern with the newer car. Like, yeah, it's a hybrid, and it, like, I understand that it can perform, but does it have passion?
I would say, in some respects, yes, it does. It has, I'd say it has, the same degree of passion that you find in most of its competitors right now, in a similar price point. So, compare it to an Audi R8, it's comparable to that. It's got, certainly got more visceral appeal, I think, in terms of the powertrain now than the original did, or at least as near as I can recall, 25 odd years having passed since I last drove one. With that twin turbocharged V6 that they have in there now, 500 horsepower. The original had about 300 horsepower from a normally aspirated V6. So it's got lots of power. The thing sounds really good. One of the really nice things that they've done is, when you in sport or track mode, when you accelerate hard, there's a duct that comes in from behind that, and a flap opens up, and it pipes in some of the sound into the cabin. So you really hear it when you accelerate hard. And it's a totally passive system, totally acoustic. It's not it's not synthesizing anything or doing any active noise control. It's just basically just opening a flap that lets you hear what's going on behind you. So in that respect, it's got more passion. But to the same degree that I think most modern quote unquote supercars do, it has been somewhat sanitized. When the original NSX came out, what at that time were typically called exotics rather than supercars. The term supercar hadn't really appeared probably until around 2000, I think. Those cars were very temperamental and usually pretty unreliable and required a lot of extra servicing. And the NSX transformed expectations of what's expected, what customers expected in that segment. And so when you look at exotics or supercars, there was before NSX and after NSX, and everything that came after the NSX, manufacturers, whether it was Ferrari or Lamborghini and Porsche and Audi, they really had to step up their game and create cars that were much more usable, reliable, better fit and finish, nicer interiors. And so, you look at those cars today, and you can see what they gained from the original NSX. This new one, it's certainly not as groundbreaking as that car was. I think it's very well executed. It's certainly not the first hybrid supercar, but it's the first one in this price range. Between 150 and 200,000.
Right. So that's like 918 Spider kind of thing in a much more affordable package.
Right. 918 Spider, McLaren P1, LaFerrari, those are, all cars that, are getting up to, close to $1 million a piece and beyond. So, $200,000 cars, not what anybody can term affordable, but, it's starting to bring it down, into that more realistic segment, let's say. So, it's, the car's really fast. It rides and handles really well. Everything works. It feels, in a lot of respects like a high end Honda, which is what it is. And there's nothing wrong with that. Certainly, the infotainment system. If you've driven any recent Hondas, you'll feel right at home.
That's kind of too bad.
It's got the same touch controls, that are in our Civic that we got, and it's running on Android, just like our Civic, which is it's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. But where things got really interesting is once I came back from the drive loop and we get to try it out on the drag strip, because this is a hybrid, most modern high performance cars now have launch control systems built in. And where launch control, typically what's been done with launch control systems up until now is with traction control, traction control is designed to keep the wheels from spinning up, so you keep the car stable, and avoid too much wheel spin. The problem is when you're launching the car on asphalt or on a high traction surface, if you use conventional traction control in that scenario, what it'll do is it'll bring the engine power down, and you end up with not having enough power to get the car launched, and it just bogs down. And so what launch control systems do is they're designed to let the engine rev up to somewhere around the peak torque of the engine. So typically somewhere in the 3,000 to 4,000 RPM range. And once you activate the launch control, you step on the brake, you step on the gas, and then you release the brake. And before you release the brake, the engine revs up, and then as soon as you release the brake, the wheels spin until the vehicle catches up to the wheels, and that's how you get your maximum acceleration. Well, because this is a hybrid, now you've got electric motors that are generating their maximum torque at 0 RPM instead of at 3,000 or 4,000 RPM. And so you've got to do things a little differently. So, in order to reduce the strain on the drivetrain and take advantage of the electric motors, what they actually do is they get the car moving with full torque from the electric motors. And then once it's rolling at about 3 or 4 miles an hour, then it engages the clutch and starts to feed in the power from the engine, and it just takes off like mad. And one of the things, if you've used traction or used launch control on a lot of cars that are out there on the market today, there's usually this really convoluted sequence of things that you have to go through to activate it, because manufacturers usually don't actually want you to use it very much because it does put so much strain on the drivetrain. On an Audi, on the R8, you have to go through a whole rigmarole to activate it. On the NSX, basically you just twist the knob on the center console to put it in track mode, put your left foot on the brake pedal, right foot on the gas, release the brake, and off you
See,
go.
I like it when automakers are that confident, where they're just like, yeah, you go ahead. You're not going to break it.
Yeah.
Subaru is kind of the same way with when they bring the WRX or the STI around with launch control. They'll let you just pound on it mercilessly. They're like, oh yeah, we've tried.
Yeah. So, I mean, I managed to run an 11.3 quarter mile at 122 miles.
What's that feel like?
Using that. Actually, now having driven the Tesla Model S a couple of years ago with insane mode, it actually doesn't feel quite as fast, but it still feels really, really fast.
Yeah.
I mean, I've actually, I've driven, faster cars, at Milan. A few years back, I had an opportunity. Ford used to do this thing. They would invite some media to participate in the annual NMRA meet that takes place at the end of June at Milan, and they'd bring a bunch of Mustangs out and put us in those, and we would do some bracket racing. So I had a chance to do that a couple of times, and one time I actually got to take a pass in a Cobra Jet, which is their factory drag race car, and that was about a 10-second pass in that thing. So that was actually a quicker car than this one was, but that's also not a street legal car. This is a completely street legal car, totally stock, unmodified. So aside from the Model S, the Tesla Model S, this is the quickest street legal car I've ever driven that I'm aware.
What was your trap speed?
100.
Jesus. Yeah. That's
and I mean, it was totally stable.
Yeah, I bet.
No commotion. But the thing is, because it's a hybrid, and it's using the electric motors to actually get it launched. No more smoky burnouts. So you do kind of lose some of the classic elements of driving fast in that kind of environment. But hey,
I guess, yeah. I mean,
it's progress.
Right.
It's
I'm older and more mature now. I don't really indulge in the smoky burnout anyway. All that means is that I'm gonna have to buy tires.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't want to do that.
And tires for cars like this are not cheap. So if you can get that kind of speed without having to shred your tires, why not?
Yeah. So once you trade in the Miata, once you're done with that, you can get yourself an NSX, or you can keep one and just get the other.
Yeah.
I mean, it'd be fine. Just like.
Yeah, I mean that thing's worth about as much as
for now.
So I don't think so.
It's 11's under. That's a what was it? 11.9. 11.3, low 11s. So
yeah.
So if you practice at it, you might even be able to get that into the 10s. Three.
Probably not. I mean, you're not going to do much better than the launch control setup.
Yeah, I guess that's true. It's like 3/10 can be a lot when you get down there, but yeah. So compare that with we talked about your Fox Body Mustang last week or last show. That had 225 horsepower. That might not even have cracked 100 miles an hour in the quarter.
Probably not. Of course, it was also 800 pounds lighter than this car. The NSX, the current NSX, in part because it's a hybrid, is not really a lightweight. It's about 3,800.
That's still light for a 500 horsepower hybrid.
Yeah, well, actually, when it's 500 horsepower just from the engine, the total output is like 573, 575.
Yeah, I mean, given what it is, it's not super heavy, but
no, I mean, you're not going to complain about the performance of this thing.
I'm impressed.
Yeah, well, and the time we get to spend with the NSX at the drag strip actually came a couple days after the sports car race, the IMSA sports car race. It's part of the Detroit Grand Prix weekend, which happened last Saturday. And during the sports car race, the NSX this year is competing in the GTD class in IMSA for the first time. And, so it debuted back in January at the 24 Hours of Le Mans. 24 Hours of Daytona, wrong 24 hours. 24 Hours of Daytona. And it's been showing pretty good speed up until now, but it hasn't managed to get a win. And in Detroit, they got their first win with the NSX. And I got a chance to chat with Art St. Cyr, who is the president of Honda Performance Development. And HPD does all of Honda's North American car racing programs. So, they build the engines for the Indy cars, and they run the NSX program and various other efforts, some grassroots racing efforts here in North America. And so it's a short interview. We talked a little bit about the NSX and what Honda's or HPD's other future plans might be, whether they might get back into prototype racing and IndyCar. And so why don't we drop that interview in here?
I think that makes perfect sense.
Okay.
Okay, creep forwards again. Foot on the brake, full power. Off the gas, on the brakes. So nice and gently slowing the car down.
All right. Here with Art St. Cyr, president of Honda Performance Development. HPD is responsible for all of Honda and Acura motorsports programs in North America, right?
That is correct.
Okay, so
all automobiles. So the motorcycles is something else, but
so all car racing.
Correct.
So your big new effort this year, you've been doing IndyCar for a while, and you had a good win last week at Indianapolis.
Yeah, it's kind of a big one there.
Yeah. But your big program this year is the new NSX GT3, you're running in the Pirelli World Challenge and the IMSA GTD class. So, how's from HPD's perspective, how's the NSX program going so far?
Actually, it's been going really well. I mean, it's our first year. It's our first time ever really doing a GT3 car. What really helped was the production car was really made with the GT3 spec in mind. But even so, we're kind of the new kids on the block, and we've been kind of getting faster and faster. And actually qualifying here, Catherine Legg we're starting second in the race today. So, as you can see, we're definitely seeing some progress.
Yeah, it's a good. It seems to be going along quite well. And under the IMSA rules for the GTD class, it's considered to be a customer class. But HPD, Acura, and Lexus have an exemption this year because it's your first year in the class to provide factory support. After this year, is it going to become a regular customer program so that any team that wants to buy an NSX and get involved could do that, or what's your future plan?
Well, we're still working on the details of that. Right now, really what we're focused on is making sure that the car is raceable. Right? We have a factory program with a professional team that's working on making sure we get all the bugs out of the car. So if and when we decide to do that, it's going to be ready to go.
Okay. Any plans to eventually maybe expand into a GTLM or GTE program with that car?
Well, we always look at potential opportunities around North America where we race, but right now really our focus is on the GTD and making sure that, and also in the GT series in Pirelli World Challenge to make the car a consistent winner. Once we get that done, then we'll really be able to start looking at other things that we want to do.
And I think probably the most important difference between the race car, aside from all the safety equipment and everything, but from the race car to the production car, is you eliminated the hybrid system because of the rules. Current GT rules don't allow that. Any thoughts about? Has there been any discussion about in any of the GT classes with the sanctioning bodies about bringing hybrid powertrains into GT racing? Since there's so many, hybridized GT cars, sports performance cars on the road now, and more coming all the time. Is that an area that's being discussed?
Well, actually, we've been discussing this with the sanctioning bodies for several years now. That our original intention was to race the NSX as a hybrid vehicle. That's really what we wanted. But there was some, let's say, hesitancy, with the sanctioning bodies because there's some increased cost, some increased complexity. But we are very, very confident with the hybrid system that we developed in the NSX road car. That, like I said, that was our intention to race it as a hybrid. But right now, as you said, the GT3 rules is a rear-wheel drive, two-wheel drive configuration, non-hybrid. So we made the the adjustments to do that, but it's a mass production engine. I mean, we get it from the factory that makes the engine that we did that, so it can be converted any time that we're able to do that.
Okay. So
but we would actually welcome a series that would let us race it as a hybrid.
Okay. And what about the prototype class? You've got this year the new DPI class has come in here in IMSA, and the global LMP2 cars. Is HPD? HPD was previously involved in the old LMP2 class. Are you going to get into the new DPI class in the coming years?
Well, like I said, we look at all racing series. The DPI formula is very attractive, but our philosophy is, because it was so new, that we really wanted to kind of let it play out and see how things are going. I mean, obviously it's gaining a lot of attention, so of course we'll look at it, but right now we haven't made any decision on what we're going to do if and when we're going to join that type of class. But like I said, right now our main focus for Acura Motorsports is really focusing on the NSX GT3 and making that into a consistent winner.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much, Art.
It's my pleasure.
All right. Well, so from NSX and Honda racing to the thrilling twists and turns of the Supreme Court, why don't we talk about patent exhaustion? Because I'm sure we're all exhausted from racing. I'm trying to tie it in. I'm trying.
Okay. Well, the case that I put in the rundown here, you might not think it actually has anything to do with cars, but potentially it could. This is a case that the Supreme Court ruled on last week. There was a 7-1 ruling, and it's the case known as Impression Products Inc. versus Lexmark. Lexmark is a company that spun off many years ago from IBM. That was their printer business. That Lexmark makes laser printers and inkjet printers, and you might be wondering what that has to do with cars. And technically, it has nothing to do with cars, except that this was a patent case. Lexmark, like a lot of other printer manufacturers, has been, going through various shenanigans to, sell you cheap printers at your local office supply store, and then sell you ridiculously expensive ink and toner cartridges to refill those printers when you exhaust the ink that comes with it from the factory.
Yeah, the ink that lasts for like 3 pages.
Yeah, and so I'm sure you've seen there's plenty of companies, third-party companies that do replacement ink and toner cartridges, and they in many cases what they do is the office supply stores will you can turn in your old empty cartridges to them, and in exchange when you buy a new one. And what they do is they sell those to these third-party companies like Impression Products, and they refurbish them and put them back, refill them and put them back and resell them. And Lexmark decided to sue these guys, saying you can't make you can't refurbish our cartridges or refill these cartridges. And they sued a bunch of companies, and most of the others all settled a long time ago. But Impression decided to fight this.
And they fought it all the way to the Supreme Court.
Yeah,
right.
And the Supreme Court ruled for Impression, saying that basically, once Lexmark sells the cartridges to the original, consumers that bought them, they no longer have any patent rights over that. They can't collect any royalties on those anymore. And so, those consumers are free to do whatever they want with them, including, giving them to companies like Impression to refill them.
Well, and that's where it applies to cars, because over the last few years, there's been the idea of right to repair. And I've seen this just sort of myself trying to maintain a sophisticated car. It's got a lot of proprietary software in it, and there are tools that are designed specifically to work with it and software to actually, maintain it. And the manufacturer doesn't really like the idea of the average consumer having this stuff for a variety of reasons. Some of them valid, some of them are, sort of, if you want to spin it like they're trying to create a monopoly, sure, but part of it is the fact that it's a very sophisticated machine that could kill somebody if you don't repair it correctly. And so there's two sides to the issue, but that's sort of that whole repair side of it and right to repair is where these two cases, or this dovetails with automotive.
Right. And, I mean, we've seen, some cases over the last few years where car makers, have tried to, certainly when some states have tried to pass right to repair laws. I think you had something in Massachusetts.
Yep.
And, there have been other states where this has happened. The automakers have fought against those. And, they have tried to, when the Copyright Office, has considered exemptions to the Digital Millennium Copyright Act that would, for example, allow for other manufacturers of other diagnostic tools to tap into the systems, the software in the vehicles. They have fought against that. So what where this case could potentially play into that is as we move into autonomous vehicles. Manufacturers of those vehicles are, they're almost certainly going to end up being liable for the performance of those vehicles. So if anything goes wrong with those vehicles, they are going to be on the hook for, any damages. And so that means that they're going to be increasingly reluctant anyway to sell those vehicles to consumers. And I think that this case will probably push them even further away from wanting to sell these vehicles to consumers. So you'll probably won't, from most manufacturers, you probably won't ever be able to buy an autonomous vehicle. They'll only be available through mobility services, ride-hailing type services and other services where either the manufacturers retain ownership of the vehicles and basically you pay per mile or per ride or, pay subscription fees or whatever to have access to vehicles, or, they will have other fleets operate them for them, but it will be under the condition that the manufacturers retain the ability to do all the service and maintenance on these vehicles, because once a manufacturer sells a vehicle to a consumer, it's going to be just like this. They can no longer prevent that consumer from modifying or servicing it with third-party parts that might not be up to the original specs, things like that. So, I think that this will drive manufacturers in that direction.
Yeah, I mean, the best they can do at this point, I suppose, is just if there's any kind of warranty, they can certainly deny a warranty claim if the proper parts or proper procedures weren't followed. But again, like once it's in your hands, like if I buy a blender, I can do whatever I want with that. I can put the cat in it.
Right.
Nothing stops me.
You can go in, with a car, you can go in and modify the software, recalibrate the thing, and manufacturers aren't going to want people doing that, because even if it does, even if they say, okay, if you do anything like that, it's going to void the warranty. If something bad happens, the blowback on the manufacturer, the PR, blowback is going to be so bad that, even though they may not be technically liable for the problem, it's still going to reflect poorly on the company.
Well, yeah, I mean, think of how popular the idiot idea of rolling coal is. And so, to do that, you are directly modifying the sort of federally mandated and kind of administrated emissions controls.
Uh-huh.
And so if you do that on your car, if you even now, if you grab a tuner and you adjust the mapping of your ECU so you feel like you run a little richer and you make a little more power, whether or not you actually do, it's very easy to say overload the catalytic converter and burn that out. Well, that's warranted for 10 years. So if you do that, then the manufacturer, gets the car in for right. Unless they can say, oh, no, you tinkered with this. And so we're not going to cover. I don't know if they can actually deny that because they're federally mandated to cover that equipment. But if the user causes the issue, you know what I'm saying? That's another area. But it does put it in a very interesting place where it's a consumer good and the consumer has the right to either maintain or break it as they see fit, with the parts that they see fit. And there is a little wiggle room about what the manufacturer is going to cover in terms of warranty, but it opens that liability question up, I guess. And from my work with lawyers, there's nothing large corporations hate more than liability.
Absolutely. Yeah. So continuing on, from that topic, one of a tweet that just came in a short time ago. John was asking the question: realistically, when should I be able to buy a $30,000 or so car with hands-off capability on highways as opposed to full autonomy? Very possibly never.
Yeah. So I guess we should think about when you're talking about autonomous cars too. You're talking about like level 5, right? Like
level 4 or 5. So the only distinction between what's defined as a level 4 autonomous or level 5 is they're both fully autonomous, but a level 4 is can operate fully autonomously within certain prescribed conditions. So for example, it might not be able to do it in the snow, or it might not be able to do it in dusty conditions. So there may be limits on when it can do it, but it can operate fully autonomously without a human ever taking over control. And then as you expand the range, the operating domain of where it can actually do autonomous operation, when you eventually get to the point where it can do it everywhere, that becomes level 5 at that point.
Okay.
So the level 4 and 5 are what we call highly automated driving.
Right. Sounds like boring.
Yeah. Well, it's not. Basically, you don't do any driving. There's no human driving. It's the vehicle drives itself. You never take over control. What John here is asking about is something more along the lines of a level 2 to a level 3. True hands-off capability. One of the first cars with that will be the Cadillac CT6 later this summer with the Super Cruise system, which will be a truly hands-off system. And it's got driver monitoring to make sure the driver's available to take over control if needed. But it's designed for hands-off capability. But that's going to be a $75,000 car. It's entirely possible that you may never be able to get a $30,000 car, at least not a new $30,000 car with that kind of capability in it.
What about the idea?
It'll probably be at least another 4 or 5 years.
What about the idea of, I see Comma AI is making some noise about sort of offering a DIY kit. Could you ever?
Well, that was last year, and they canceled that program.
There's still there was chattering today.
Oh, was there? Okay, I haven't.
Well, I don't know if it was about that, but I know that they're still around.
They made the software open source. They published it on Git, I think. And they put the plans out there. So if somebody else wants to make their own version of it, they can do that. But I would strongly recommend against doing that. And even still, that's not really going to be fully hands-off capable. It's it's a bad idea. Just don't even bother.
Don't do that.
Yeah.
You know what? Have a kid now. And by in 16 years, he'll be able to drive you around, and he or she, I'm sorry, and you will have your fully autonomous. You will absolutely have a fully autonomous vehicle in 16 years. Or
if you want to ride around in a $30,000 car with your hands off the steering wheel, install
a taxi
app on your phone,
yeah.
And get Lyft or some other service.
That's very disciplined. I like it. I see what you're up to. But the autonomous thing too, and liability, that actually brings us to another topic that you put in the rundown that's really interesting is the trolley problem, which I think also underscores the fact that we may never see private ownership of autonomous cars.
Right. As I've said before, for a whole bunch of reasons, you probably won't be able to buy a fully autonomous car. And one of the issues around autonomous vehicles is what they call the trolley problem, or basically programming ethics into the vehicle. You get these potential edge cases where some sort of crash cannot be avoided, and how is the vehicle programmed to make a decision? If there's a potential where you've got 5 people over here or 1 person over here, which one do you decide, to do, do you decide to kill 1 person or kill 5 people? And, it's a hypothetical situation, but it could potentially happen. but it's probably going to be pretty rare. But there's people thinking about how to deal with that, and it's a complex problem. But the reality is it's so unlikely to ever happen. And what's probably going to end up happening. There's a story in Wired that it's likely to end up coming down to some legal decisions. Things will happen. There will be court cases, and it'll end up being down to lawyers and judges to decide what is the correct response in those kinds of situations. And then another way that this could all play out as well is I've been a big proponent of autonomous vehicles should be also equipped with V2V vehicle to vehicle communications, and if you do that, there was a conference I was at speaking at a couple of weeks ago in California, and there's a researcher from Toyota, his name's Gaurav Bansal, and I've seen him speak a number of times. And one of the things that Toyota has done in Japan, where they've already launched V2V on a couple of models in Japan, is they have what they call cooperative adaptive cruise control. I mean, you were talking about ACC before, where it's using the radar to measure the distance to the vehicle ahead of you and maintain a safe distance. Well, if you add vehicle-to-vehicle communications to that, and you've got two vehicles with V2V capability talking to each other, they can cooperate, and you can make the control even smoother, and you can have the vehicles running closer together. If the following vehicle knows, that the leading vehicle is going to slow down before the sensors can actually detect it, you can have, this cooperative control, and you can, as you get into more and more automation, you can start to extend that capability because, with V2V, you can see beyond the line of sight that the sensors have. When you've got the sensors on a vehicle, they can only see what's around them. So if there's vehicles around you, you can't see what's 2 or 3 vehicles down the road or, a couple hundred yards down the road, but other vehicles can, and they can transmit that information back and forth. So you can do smarter control. And, there's the potential that, the more you can extend the situational awareness of an automated vehicle, you could potentially avoid getting into these edge case scenarios like the trolley problem.
Yeah, I think that those things are going to, those are problems we're going to have to solve, and almost on an individual sort of situational basis. You can't really make a blanket rule because you get into whataboutism, just so many different scenarios. Really, you have to fall back on the sort of interpretation of the statutes that are there to sort of make that one work, and that's what we're going to have to do. So yeah, let's move on to more doom and gloom about fancy future cars. Premiums going up for Teslas for insurance. You're going to pay more to insure your hyper expensive car because they're really expensive when they break.
Yeah, and that's one of the interesting conversations I've been involved in with some people, over the last year. Is when you get into automated vehicles, what happens to insurance companies? If cars, all of a sudden are no longer crashing at the same frequency, and one of the potential things that could happen is, these automated cars also tend to be a lot more expensive. And so, even though crashes may be less frequent, when they do happen, the damage is significantly more expensive.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you're going to break those sensors that have to be kind of exposed in a lot of cases, and with Teslas, even when they, when they're not autonomous, like other premium cars, they are more expensive to repair. Which is, that's interesting too, because I saw on Twitter, one of the sort of auto writers I follow, he's in Europe, but he kind of pointed out that a lot of the pieces that they use, and not necessarily like collision repair parts, which you're talking about body pieces, then that's all there's nowhere else to get that than Tesla. But, stuff like the brake pads and a lot of the underlying pieces that build that car, they're not unique to Tesla. They're from suppliers, and some of the parts cross-reference to other automakers, and you can get that stuff less expensively than going directly through Tesla. So it's just interesting that like they're that much more expensive, even though they're kind of built from common stuff where they can be.
Yeah, well, I think, in this particular case, AAA has decided to raise the premiums by up to 30% on the Model S and the Model X because, they're seeing, data from the Highway Loss Data Institute. They're associated with Insurance Institute for Highway Safety. They do actuarial data, on all different cars, and they collect data on different types of different vehicles and different drivers, and they put together these actuarial tables that insurance companies use to figure out okay, how much should I be charging for premiums to cover this car, how much, if there's an accident, how much is it going to cost me to fix it, and then they charge accordingly. And so the cost of repairing Teslas is very high, especially for the Model X, with those fancy doors, but even for others. And this is not a problem that's necessarily unique to Tesla. A couple years back, when Ford first launched the aluminum F-150, I don't know if you remember, Edmunds did a thing. They bought an F-150 and then they had one of their writers, go in the garage with a sledgehammer and start whacking at the side of this thing because they wanted to figure out how much it was actually going to cost to repair it. And one of the interesting things that they found is that the taillight cluster, because the blind spot information system uses radar sensors in the rear corners. What Ford had done is they actually integrated the radar sensor into the taillight cluster. And, in the process of inflicting this damage on the truck, they cracked the taillight cluster and it needed to be repaired. It was an $850 part because of that radar sensor in there.
But yeah, I mean, that's sort of the double-edged sword. As the cars get more sophisticated, the parts that break are more expensive. But that's, if it's going to have that part that's expensive, but also avoid collisions sort of on a more global level, like, you're going to reduce the overall amount of collisions. So as an insurer, your cost should actually drop. I just don't think we're there yet. So in the meantime, they're going to crank up the rates.
Yeah. Clearly, from crash test results and things like that, Teslas are very good at protecting their occupants. So your chances of being injured if you get into a crash in a Tesla, are a lot less than in many other cars. So, that's good, in terms of being somebody riding or in a Tesla. But, the damage that's inflicted on the car itself, because the cost of repairs is so high for a number of reasons. It's an aluminum structure. They've got, there's a limited number of places that can actually fix it. The parts themselves are expensive. What often happens is, they end up writing off these cars because it costs more to repair them than the vehicle is worth at that point. Yeah.
So if you're worried about that, maybe drive something a little bit more common.
Yeah. Like an Accord or a Camry.
Or an NSX. Wait, no, that's not right. I'm sorry, we said Accord.
It only feels common.
Right. Ooh. No, I don't think that's true.
No, that's not true.
We're just making inaccurate statements now. So we've gotten through all our topics.
Yeah. We did have a couple other questions on Facebook. So let's see. KC would love to hear a discussion on the new Subaru Ascent that's coming out next year. It's a big 3-row SUV, and that's about all we know right now.
I think it's going to be great.
It probably will be. It probably have real good all-wheel drive. And
I doubt it'll have the flat six. I think my guess is
said what's going to be in.
Yeah, I don't think they've said either. And as much as I love that flat six because it sounds like a Porsche, that's just a lot to keep going for one model. The 2.5 turbo can probably do it. And my assumption would be that they'll also have the hybrid idea going on there.
Yep.
At some point. So,
and then Jarrett had a question. What the hell is wrong with Tesla? Why on earth are they developing a new platform for the Model Y? Isn't the Model 3 a bespoke platform already? Clearly, they have learned the ways of VW with the MQB. Earlier this evening, Tesla had their their annual meeting, their annual shareholder meeting. And I was reading an article before this started. Elon was asked about this, and he made his response to the question I thought was actually kind of strange, and not really very accurate. He said, he has said previously, he said a few months back that the Model Y, which is going to be their new, more affordable crossover, is not going to share its platform with the Model 3. It's going to have a separate platform. And at the shareholder meeting, he said, what he said was they learned their lesson from the developing the Model X off the Model S. That they should have done a dedicated platform for the that was designed to be an SUV. And actually, you're looking at it, the problem with the Model X is not its platform. That's the least of its problems.
No, I thought the problem was the Falcon doors.
There's that and a whole bunch of other stuff, and the design, the seat design that they put inside, for the second row seats. There was a whole bunch of issues with that thing. The platform was not one of those issues. The reality is most high volume crossovers and SUVs are derived from car platforms. They're not unique. And, even in the cases where manufacturers give them separate designations, they more often than not share a lot of componentry with.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to ask is it one of those like CEO obfuscation moves to people who don't know any better to say like, oh yeah, it's going to be its own platform, very much the way as like back in the day, the Chrysler K platform was pretty much exactly the same as the E platform.
And the G and the H.
Right. It's just the E and the K were like, the E was the longer K. That's all. So like your Reliant was the same thing as your New Yorker.
The distance between the axles, they all have the same track, so they didn't even make them wider or narrower.
Yeah. They, like everything's
exactly the same width.
Right. So like, is that what he's doing? It doesn't make any sense. Like if
who knows? I
mean, designing a platform is so expensive.
Yeah, I know.
I think Tesla's problem is Silicon Valley.
Yeah,
like it's Tesla.
Yes, I would agree there.
That just seems like hubris, but I mean, whatever.
Hubris? Are you joking?
Yeah, I mean, I like Elon Musk. I really do. I think I love that he just decides to do stuff. I think that's fantastic. I've been watching with rapt attention about how SpaceX has worked. But yeah, man.
Yeah, I mean, in many respects, SpaceX has been far more successful than Tesla has.
Yeah, well, I think to a certain degree, rockets are easier than consumer automobiles. That's, All right. Was that all the questions?
Let's see. I believe so. Yep.
I mean, I think we kind of commiserated. We didn't really we kind of answered, but yeah, that's what we do. So anyway, thank you I did see the feedback on, we got some good reviews on iTunes. So thank you very much.
We appreciate that.
It warmed my heart that everybody's found us now, because I went and read the Autoblog podcast reviews too, and people, some of the people leaving comments are not in love with their new format, and that's too bad, because they're working really hard at it. I like the music and what they've done, so I just it does make me feel good that people miss us. So now they know where to find us. So please tell your friends and leave us reviews there. Please engage with us on social media. We are Facebook, Wheelbearings, Wheelbearing Media, I believe is our page. I'm Boston_Auto. We are on Twitter. We are at Wheelbearingscast, no vowels, on Twitter. You are Sam Abuel Samid on Twitter. I think those are all the places to hit us. We have an email, right?
We have an email at wheelbearingscast with vowels at gmail.com. And I think that's about it. And, if you like the show, tell your friends that are into cars and transportation, and, tell them to subscribe too, in whatever format they like to listen to, whether it's, Pocket Casts or Apple Podcasts or Overcast or anything else.
You know what? I actually think I want to ask for a little bit more feedback. Is what are we not doing that we should be doing? Like what do you want more of and less of? Kind of like help us fine tune the podcast in that sense. Like, are we doing too much garage and not enough something else? So let us know, and we'll either completely ignore it or we'll make adjustments.
All right.
Thanks for listening.
All right. See you next time.
I gotta give the dog a pill.
All right.
At Arizona State University, we're bringing world-class education from our globally acclaimed faculty to you. Ranked #1 in innovation for 10 consecutive years and #2 among public universities for employability, ASU isn't just ahead of the curve. It's creating new paths to success. Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online, that's a degree better. Explore more than 300 undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
All you homeowners have unique needs. Some feel the need to paint their door a vibrant shade of blue. Others have the need to decorate their bathroom with fish, anchors, and other nautical items. And because each homeowner has unique needs, Geico helps you get the right coverage for your home and what's in it. That way, you get exactly what's right for you, even if your needs are unique. Get more with Geico.